10 years after her husband's death, Margaret's children began distancing themselves from her, phone calls became rare, and conversations always ended dryly and briefly. When her son finally called after months of silence, his tone clearly conveyed annoyance.
Mom, what's wrong now? How's your health? Are you doing okay? I've been really busy lately, so I haven't been able to visit much. I'll try to come by when I have time.
Yes, I understand. I'm fine. Work hard, son.
The conversation ended in just a few minutes. Margaret's heart ached at her son's tone. He seemed to be fulfilling an obligation rather than genuinely caring about her well-being. Her daughter's attitude was even worse. Occasionally she would call pretending to check in, but there was always an ulterior motive.
Mom, do you happen to have any money saved up? I really need some help with something right now.
Money. Honey, it breaks my heart that you're struggling. But I don't have much to spare either.
Margaret couldn't find the words to respond. She was deeply hurt to realize that her daughter wasn't calling out of concern, but was simply trying to rely on her financially. Her daughter responded coldly to Margaret's silence and hung up abruptly.
Fine, whatever. We'll talk about this later.
Margaret could no longer feel any affection or respect in her children's conversations. These weren't the same children she had devotedly raised. Their words and attitudes increasingly made her feel like she was seen not as a parent, but as a burdensome presence. They only saw it when they needed something. Margaret's health deteriorated, but her children never once came to visit. Arthritis and back pain made it increasingly difficult for her to move around alone, and trips to the doctor became an ordeal. She spent her days looking out the window at the street, instead of going out, yet her children showed no curiosity about their mother's daily life. When the phone rang, Margaret would eagerly pick it up with excitement. But most calls ended after brief conversations, or were made for entirely different purposes.
Mom, have you looked into any nursing homes lately? It seems like living alone might be getting difficult for you now.
I've never thought about a nursing home. I'm more comfortable living in my own home.
Well, we're too busy to visit often. What if something happens to you while you're alone?
They didn't consider Margaret's perspective at all. Instead, they barely concealed their intention that it would be more convenient for their own lives if their mother went to a nursing home. Margaret realized that her children no longer needed her, but the indifference and coldness she felt from their attitudes isolated her even more. She wanted to open up to her children about her loneliness, but their responses became increasingly cold.
I've been feeling quite lonely lately. I'd love to see you all more often. It would be nice if we could spend time together like we used to.
Her child, listening to their mother's words, laughed cynically and replied,
Mom, please stop saying things like that. We're all so busy raising our kids and working. How can we worry about you every day? Face reality.
Margaret was left speechless, unable to respond. Her daughter went further, as if to end the conversation.
Mom, we have our own lives too. Isn't it enough that we raised us when we were young? Now you need to take care of yourself too.
When Margaret struggled to find words, they threw even sharper comments at her.
Mom, honestly, you doing this is a burden to us. We're grateful that you raised us when we were young, but that doesn't mean it's a lifelong debt, does it?
Margaret's heart sank. The moment it was so starkly revealed that her children were completely turning their backs on her as a parent, she no longer knew what to say. She held back tears. But her children had no interest in their mother's feelings, as their mother's requests for help due to loneliness and declining health were repeatedly dismissed. Her heart suffered deeper wounds. Her children's cold attitude was no longer simple indifference, but had clearly turned into avoidance and rejection. One day, Margaret spoke to her children with affection one last time.
Still, do you know how happy I was raising you? There were years when I devoted myself to you.
But her daughter replied cynically,
Mom, that's in the past. Now our own families are more important to us. You should learn how to live independently now.
Margaret could no longer continue the conversation. Her children's words and attitudes were like poisonous thorns, piercing her heart. When it became clear that there was nothing more to expect from her children, Margaret felt powerlessness beyond despair. One day, she was surprised to see her children visit together. Joint visits were rare, and the unexpected visit excited her, but their expressions were not bright.
What brings you both here together? Is something wrong?
Mom, your health hasn't been very good lately, so we've been discussing something.
She waited nervously for their words. After hesitating for a moment, they brought up the topic of a nursing home.
It seems too dangerous for you to live alone now, Mom. So we looked into nursing homes. There are places where nurses take care of you 24/7, and you can live comfortably.
Margaret was greatly surprised and waved her hands.
A nursing home? Why should I go to such a place? This house is the most comfortable for me.
Her children began sophisticated persuasion and pressure to send Margaret to a nursing home. Initially, they approached her kindly, but when Margaret firmly refused, their attitude gradually changed.
Mom, it's too dangerous for you to live alone now. Your health is getting worse and we're worried. The nursing home is really a good place. Nurses will always be by your side, and there are many programs so you won't be bored.
Margaret shook her head and replied,
Why should I leave home? This house has all the memories of living with your father. Don't tell me to leave here.
Her daughter frowned at her mother's reaction and said,
Mom, let me be honest with you. Having you stay here alone is too difficult for us too. We feel bad that we can't visit often, but honestly, the burden is too great. If you go to a nursing home, we'll feel more at ease too.
Margaret wanted to believe that her children were genuinely concerned about her, but the cold attitude contained in those words deeply hurt her heart.
Still, I want to live in this house longer. This is where I'm comfortable.
Her son continued the persuasion.
Mom, don't worry about the house. We'll leave your house as it is and take care of the nursing home fees ourselves. We'll make sure you can live more comfortably.
Her daughter added, as if giving an ultimatum.
Honestly, Mom, your house is too old too. How long do you think you can stay here? It's time for a fresh start.
Margaret spoke clearly, but her children kept repeating the same story.
Mom, we're only thinking about you. We want you to be happy too. If you go to a nursing home, you'll be much better off.
Margaret could clearly see that her children were pretending to worry about her while actually trying to persuade her for their own convenience. However, as her children continued to pour out words, her heart began to waver.
If I can really be happier there as you say, I'll consider going. But promise me, you absolutely won't touch my house. I might want to come back later, so my house must remain as it is.
Her children nodded and smiled.
Of course, Mom. Nothing like that will ever happen. We'll only act for your sake, leaving the house as it is.
Margaret decided to trust her children's words once more. As family members who had been together for a lifetime, she wanted to believe that they truly wished for her happiness.
All right. If you're truly thinking of me when you say this, I'll trust you. But remember that the house must definitely be preserved.
Seeing her children nod and smile, Margaret felt momentarily relieved. Although there were suspicious moments, she didn't want to withdraw her trust just because they were her children. A few days later, she rode in the car with her children to the nursing home. The atmosphere in the car was awkward, and her heart was heavy. Looking at the scenery passing by the car window, she wanted to believe that her children were doing their best for her. The nursing home they arrived at felt desolate and cold, unlike the photos. Looking at the unfamiliar bed and furniture in the empty room, she hung her head. After moving Margaret's belongings to the nursing home room, her children hurriedly prepared to leave.
Mom, this place is really nice. Once you adjust, you'll be much more comfortable. We'll come again soon.
However, their expressions didn't seem sincere. Margaret said with a disappointed heart one last time.
You must visit often. If Mom can't see your faces, it will be too hard.
Her daughter forced a smile and replied.
Of course, Mom. Don't worry.
But right after saying those words, her children turned around and got in the car. The sight of her children moving away through the window brought Margaret even greater loneliness. On her first night at the nursing home, Margaret lay on the unfamiliar bed and let out a deep sigh. Everything felt strange and cold. The sound of staff footsteps in the hallway uncomfortably hit her ears, and the white ceiling felt like a prison.
Why did I have to come here?
Margaret couldn't fall asleep amid endless questions. A few days later, Margaret began feeling uncomfortable during conversations with nursing home staff. The staff acted kindly but couldn't hide their intention to forcibly send her to the medical ward.
Ma'am, your current room is nice, but considering your health condition, it would be better to move to the medical ward. Nurses are always stationed there.
Margaret answered firmly.
I'm fine. I can stay here. There's no need to move.
But the staff came every day and repeated the same words.
The medical ward is a safer environment for you, ma'am. Your children also said this place would be better for you.
Margaret began to feel increasingly anxious. She started to suspect whether her children had really made this decision for her, or if they had other ulterior motives. One day, Margaret overheard a conversation between staff members in the hallway.
About that lady, her children are gradually reducing the nursing home fees, right? It was decided to send her to the medical ward this time, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's right. If she moves to the medical ward, the room will be empty, so we can accept a new resident who pays higher fees.
The children already agreed to this. But that lady doesn't know yet, right?
Of course she doesn't know. After all, if her children decide, she has no choice but to follow.
Margaret felt like she couldn't breathe. She couldn't believe that her beloved children were calculating her so thoroughly as just a money matter, but she returned to her room pretending nothing had happened. Her hands trembled and her heart pounded, but she tried to maintain composure. That evening, a nursing home nurse came to Margaret's room. The nurse held documents and spoke with a firm expression.
Ma'am, this is what your children discussed. Considering your health condition, it would be good to move to the medical ward. The medical ward is a place where you can receive more professional care, and there are many benefits for you.
Margaret suppressed her anger and replied,
When I entered here, my children never mentioned such a thing. I'm living comfortably in this room now. There's no need to move to the medical ward.
But the nurse smiled and continued.
Your children have already recommended moving to the medical ward. Even if you refuse, there are no contractual problems with your children, so you'll eventually have to move anyway. We'll do our best for you here too, so you don't need to worry too much.
Those words seemed to suggest that Margaret had no choice at all. Margaret felt anger rising at the nurse's cold attitude and shameless tone. While Margaret was trying to adapt to nursing home life, she heard ominous rumors among other residents in the dining room. The conversation among several residents gathered around the dining table caught her attention.
You know Grace, who was moved to the medical ward last week? I heard something happened to her.
It's not just a rumor. I heard her health got worse, so she went to the hospital, and eventually
The elderly person speaking lowered their voice.
she passed away, they say. But isn't it strange? They suddenly sent her to the medical ward, and within a few days that happened.
Another person added with a worried expression.
There's something suspicious about this nursing home. I've heard many stories about healthy people whose condition suddenly worsened after being sent to the medical ward.
That makes sense. If they send people to the medical ward, rooms become empty, so they probably want to rent those rooms to people with more money.
Margaret felt tension rising as she heard this story. Although the rumor was mere speculation, seeing their attitude of trying to empty rooms gave her chills. Were they really trying to drive her away using the medical ward as an excuse? That evening, Margaret faced a situation she could no longer ignore. She accidentally overheard a conversation between two staff members in the hallway.
About that room, the children said they're reducing the nursing home fees, right? So it's right to send her to the medical ward this time.
Right. The person who will newly enter that room agreed to pay a pretty large deposit this time. So we need to handle this quickly.
But the lady is still refusing.
The children will visit again tomorrow and persuade her for sure.
Margaret was shocked and speechless. She was convinced that she had become a victim of a deal between her children and the nursing home. They were moving based on calculations that they could make more profit if Margaret went to the medical ward. Margaret returned to her room and couldn't sleep all night. The fact that her children hadn't simply entrusted her to a nursing home, but were using her life as a tool for profit generation, wouldn't leave her mind. Sitting on the bed, she held a picture frame with trembling hands. Inside were the faces of her children whom she had raised with all kinds of sacrifices.
I didn't raise you like this to receive such treatment.
Margaret slowly put down the frame and made a decision. She wouldn't passively endure anymore. A burning resolve flashed in her eyes to definitely expose the conspiracy of her children and the nursing home who were trying to use her and make them pay the price. Meanwhile, one comment from a nursing home staff member amplified her anxiety.
We received a call that your children are reducing part of the nursing home fees. Would you like to check with them once?
Margaret called her son after hearing this. Her son answered with an unpleasant voice.
Mom, why are you suddenly asking about such things? We're taking care of the nursing home fees ourselves, so don't worry about it.
But they said it was overdue. What's going on?
Her son hesitated for a moment, then answered with a shameless tone.
Nursing home fees are expensive, and honestly, you don't need such a big room living alone. So we're looking for ways to move rooms or reduce costs.
Margaret was shocked by her son's words.
I thought you were paying the nursing home fees with my father's money he left behind. Why are you trying to reduce it further?
But her son said matter-of-factly,
Mom, you know our life is tight too. Anyway, if you move to the medical ward, costs will be saved and you'll be safer too. This is for all of us.
Margaret couldn't continue the conversation anymore. Realizing she could no longer rely on her children, she hung up without a word. A few days later, Margaret accidentally overheard a conversation between nursing home staff and learned about the entire conspiracy.
That room can now be moved to the medical ward, right? The children already agreed.
The new resident will pay double the nursing home fees.
Good. The lady will object, but she'll eventually have to follow what her children say.
Margaret felt her body trembling as she returned to her room. She learned that her children had conspired with the nursing home to send her to the medical ward and transfer her room to someone else at a high price.
What wrong did I do to you to receive such treatment?
Margaret fell into despair all night, pondering the conspiracy her children and the nursing home had plotted. But there was no time to simply despair. She decided to fight on her own to escape this situation and for revenge. During her stay at the nursing home, Margaret met a man named James, an elderly gentleman in a similar situation. James had entered the nursing home before Margaret, but he too was someone who had lost everything after being betrayed by his family. Margaret and James initially didn't know much about each other's situations, but they gradually became close by walking in the garden at the same time, or sharing meal times together. James quietly said to Margaret,
"Doesn't this seem suspicious? At first, I just thought it was a nursing home, but the things happening here are getting increasingly strange."
Margaret was surprised by James's words, but having already learned about her children's conspiracy, she opened up to James about her story.
Actually, I've been feeling something strange too. I found out the reason they want to empty my room. They made a deal with the nursing home. They're trying to transfer my room at a higher price.
James nodded and shared his experience.
I also initially believed my children sent me here for my sake. But later I found out they were trying to steal my assets. They secretly disposed of real estate in my name, and eventually I was pushed out.
The two realized they were in the same fate by hearing each other's stories. James said firmly,
"Margaret, we can't just take this. We need to expose what's happening at the nursing home. We can't let our children or the nursing home use us anymore."
They decided to make a plan to solve the problem together. James secretly observed around the management office by walking the dark corridors of the nursing home every night. The nursing home's management office was always locked, but after carefully observing the times when staff changed shifts every night, he discovered there were moments when the door was briefly open after shift changes. One night, James entered through a slightly open gap in the management office. He found documents with his name and Margaret's name written on thick files organized on the shelves. The documents contained phrases like current room occupancy contract change scheduled, along with information and contract amounts for new residents. Margaret's room was scheduled to be newly contracted at twice the existing nursing home fees. James secretly photographed the documents and put them back in their original places before leaving the management office. Returning to his room, he showed Margaret the document contents and said,
"Look at this. Your room is already prepared to be transferred to someone else. The contract even includes content that your children agreed to."
Margaret trembled as she checked the document contents.
So my children really betrayed me this thoroughly. This isn't just about making money.
Margaret and James gathered additional information by eavesdropping on nursing home staff's daily conversations. James made the backyard bench where staff frequently smoked his observation spot. One day, Margaret and James heard a conversation between two staff members smoking.
That room will be emptied soon, right? The children demanded it quite strongly.
Right. And the new resident for that room will pay quite a decent amount? The director said this was a jackpot.
What if the lady objects?
Objection? That doesn't matter. The children all ready?
Margaret clenched her fists while eavesdropping on the conversation.
This is a crime. Both my children and the nursing home have been threatening me.
James patted her shoulder and said,
"That's right. But now that we've recorded this conversation, we can fight back against them."
James had thoroughly recorded the conversation content using his phone's recording function. Margaret and James casually mentioned their situation to other residents, asking if there had been similar cases at the nursing home. In the process, an elderly woman revealed that she too had experienced something similar.
My children suddenly said they had to send me to the medical ward too. The strange thing was that my children never visited me, but the nursing home said the children requested it.
Have you ever heard stories about room contracts or nursing home fees?
Well, I heard the nursing home fees went up a lot. The director said it was because the money they receive from new residents increased.
Through the elderly woman's words, Margaret and James realized the pattern that frequently occurred at the nursing home, using children's requests as an excuse to send elderly people to the medical ward, and contracting rooms to new residents at higher prices was the nursing home's profit model. James decided to approach Esther, a nurse who was one of the staff members who had worked at the nursing home all year. Esther was relatively kinder than other staff and was famous for treating residents warmly. James judged Esther to be trustworthy and carefully said to her,
Esther, I have one favor to ask. Could you check the contracts and CCTV records related to our rooms? Something strange seems to be happening.
Actually, I felt something strange at the nursing home too. Requests to move to the medical ward often came suddenly. I understand. I'll quietly look into it.
After secretly checking materials for several days, Esther brought contracts and internal memos related to the nursing home. Also, although CCTV records were managed by the nursing home's external security team, she confirmed through conversations among staff that there were no visit records at that time.
There's no record of your children visiting the nursing home on that date. There's also evidence that the contracts weren't directly written by your children.
With Esther's help, Margaret and James were able to secure important clues. Margaret shed tears while expressing gratitude.
Thank you so much, Esther. Without someone like you, we couldn't have done anything.
Margaret and James organized the evidence they had secured: the nursing home contracts, recordings of staff conversations, CCTV footage. All materials proved the conspiracy between their children and the nursing home. Margaret resolved,
I won't just take it anymore. I'll expose to the world what my children and the nursing home have done.
James held her hand and said,
Let's fight together. We need to clearly show what they've done.
Margaret and James decided to expose the nursing home's corruption to the world with the evidence they had gathered. James knew a journalist connected to a small local newspaper. He called the journalist and said,
I'm trying to expose serious corruption happening at a nursing home. There's a conspiracy here where children and the nursing home are embezzling elderly people's assets.
The journalist initially hesitated, but after checking the contract photos and recording files James showed, and the internal documents Esther provided, he realized the seriousness of the case.
This is content the public must definitely know about. I'll start reporting immediately.
With Margaret and James's consent, the journalist prepared an article about this case. The article included content exposing the nursing home's corruption and the children's collaborative behavior. Margaret finally said to the journalist,
It's okay to reveal my name. This isn't just my problem. It's something many people could experience.
After the article was published, the nursing home fell into great shock. The case quickly spread in the local community and media, and families of nursing home residents called, angrily, pouring out criticism. The director urgently gathered staff for an emergency meeting, and the conversation was filled with confusion and anger.
What are we going to do now? If residents keep leaving, our nursing home is finished.
First, we need to delete the CCTV in the problem room and manipulate records. We'll make appropriate excuses to families until the situation is sorted out.
The director thought of one countermeasure amid the increasingly serious situation pressuring Margaret to retract the article. He decided to speak directly with Margaret. The next day, Margaret was called to the nursing home director's office. The director had an unusually gentle expression. He offered her tea and said,
Ma'am, you must have had a hard time coming all this way. I should have personally brought you here. I'm sorry.
Margaret was not fooled by his fake attitude, and answered firmly,
You know what this is about. Were you uncomfortable with what I revealed?
The director forced a smile and continued,
Ma'am, did we do something wrong? Rather, we're always doing our best for our residents, so it's unfortunate that such misunderstandings arise.
Margaret looked at him with sharp eyes and said,
Misunderstanding? Isn't it true that you tried to steal my assets? Did you forge contracts too?
The director momentarily dropped his smile and lowered his voice.
Our residents all come to the nursing home for their health and comfort. You've been here a long time, so you know. But if you attack us like this, it won't be good for you either, ma'am.
Margaret realized his words were a threat, but she wasn't shaken.
Not good for me. Then what are you going to do?
The director made a cold expression and said,
If you retract that article, ma'am, we'll immediately cancel the request to send you to the medical ward. Moreover, we'll take measures to provide a better environment for other residents.
Margaret laughed at his words and replied,
Is that it? Is that the countermeasure you're offering? Many people already know the truth. No matter how much you try to silence me, it's useless.
The director now completely changed his attitude. He began making direct threats to Margaret.
Mom, you might not know this, but we manage the nursing home records and CCTV. If you cause more trouble here, we'll tell other residents and their families that you violated nursing home rules. If such rumors spread, your position could become difficult.
Margaret could no longer stand it. She stood up from her seat and said to the director,
I knew you'd come out like that, saying I violated rules. That's why I prepared this.
He took out the recorder she had prepared with James and placed it on the table. The director froze at that moment. Margaret smiled and said,
This contains evidence of you forging contracts, and conversations about trying to exploit residents' assets are recorded too. Now the police will understand when they hear this.
The director's face turned pale as he hurriedly tried to change his attitude.
Ma'am, that's a misunderstanding. If I said something wrong, I'm sorry. There might not be evidence that we did wrong.
Margaret laughed and said,
I'll let the police confirm that. I don't need to talk with you anymore.
Margaret left the director's office, resolving in her heart.
Now I need to end everything. I'll pay back exactly the pain I experienced here.
After that, she and James submitted all the materials they had gathered to the police and journalists, with additional testimony from nursing home internal staff. The nursing home's corruption and evil acts were clearly revealed. The director and senior staff couldn't avoid media criticism, and an internal investigation began. After the article exposing the nursing home's corruption and her children's collusion was published through the media, Margaret's children were caught up in fierce criticism. Co-workers and people around them whispered after reading the article, and social media was flooded with comments calling them unfilial children. Even in such situations, her children didn't admit their wrongdoing and instead began to resent their mother. Her son called Margaret and said in an angry voice,
Mom, why are you doing this? How can you embarrass us like this? Do you know what people are saying about us?
Margaret calmly replied,
I didn't embarrass you. What you did was just revealed to the world.
Her son got angry as if he couldn't understand at all.
We did our best for you, Mom. We looked into the nursing home for your health, too. Why are you stabbing us in the back like this?
Margaret sighed deeply and said,
For my health? Weren't you trying to sell off my assets? Did you think I was stupid enough to be deceived by everything?
Conflicts arose between her children due to Margaret's exposure. Her daughter got angry at her brother and said,
That's why you should have been careful from the beginning. Why did you prepare such sloppy contracts and cause this trouble?
Her son replied as if frustrated.
How was I supposed to know? Who knew Mom would go this far?
Her daughter opened her eyes wide and shouted,
Because of you, our lives are ruined. People are calling us unfilial children, and I can't hold my head up anywhere.
Their conversation was filled with blame and passing responsibility. However, even while blaming each other, they didn't admit that their actions were wrong. After several fights, her children changed strategy and tried to appease Margaret. Both visited the nursing home directly to meet her. Her daughter forced tears and said,
Mom, we were all wrong. Do you know how hard it is for us because of the article? Now we feel like everything is over.
Her son also nodded and said,
Mom, please retract the article. We were wrong, so let's end this.
Margaret immediately saw through their fake attitude. She replied with cold eyes,
If you really think you were wrong, first return the assets you took from me, and try sincerely apologizing.
However, her children made excuses that they had no assets to return. Her daughter urgently said,
Mom, that money was already all spent on nursing home fees. We don't have any spare money now either.
No.
Margaret could no longer stand their shamelessness and stood up from her seat.
No spare money. Do you think I wouldn't know what you did with that money? Don't appear in front of me anymore. Trusting children like you was the biggest mistake of my life.
Faced with their mother's firm attitude, her children could no longer say anything. Eventually, they left the nursing home, resenting each other. Her son said one last time,
Fine, Mom. We won't care anymore either. If you want to do that, do whatever you want.
Her daughter didn't even look back at her mother as she left. Their appearance was nothing but cowardice and irresponsibility itself. Margaret swallowed her tears as she watched her children's retreating figures, but she resolved in her heart.
I won't be deceived by you anymore. I won't spend the rest of my life for you.
Margaret started a new life with James in a small house in a quiet rural village. The surroundings were surrounded by green mountains and clear streams, and various vegetables grew in a small garden. Each season, she woke up every morning to the sound of birds and started her day drinking tea with James, Margaret said while tending to the flowers planted in the yard.
Now I feel like I have a place where I can truly feel happiness.
James smiled beside her and replied,
Margaret, this is your space of freedom and peace. You fully deserve it.
Margaret decided not to simply forget the pain she had experienced, but to help people suffering the same pain. She and James established a support organization for nursing home victims. This organization rapidly grew, providing various help from legal counseling to asset protection and advice on choosing nursing homes. She said at the organization's first meeting,
We will fight so that elderly people are no longer marginalized and exploited. I hope my choice becomes hope for many people.
This organization, along with Margaret's name, caused great social repercussions, and her story was widely introduced in the media. After Margaret firmly cut off relations with them, her children initially resented their mother and tried to justify their actions. However, as time passed, they keenly felt the consequences of their actions. Experiencing social criticism and economic difficulties, they belatedly began to realize their wrongdoings. One day, her son came to Margaret's organization office and said tearfully,
Mom, am I too late? I now realize what a huge mistake I made. I won't make such choices again. Please forgive me.
Margaret looked at him for a while and said quietly,
Forgiveness is for me, not for you. But the wounds you gave me will need time. If you've truly changed, show me that.
Her daughter also came and cried with regret. She said,
Mom, I'm really sorry. I'll never disappoint you again. I was so foolish.
Margaret relaxed her expression and quietly replied,
Show me for a long time that you're changing. That's the only way you can do it.
Margaret felt complicated emotions seeing her children's attitude change. On one hand, she wanted to believe their sincerity, but the deep wounds weren't easily healed. She sat with James and said,
I still don't know if I did the right thing. They say they've changed. But I think the love I gave them was taken too much for granted.
James nodded and comforted her.
Margaret, you're stronger than anyone. Just giving them a chance to change makes you wonderful. Now think of your happiness first.
Margaret's organization gained more and more support, and she gradually began to open her heart to her children too. However, she resolved never to return to her past self. Now she decided to live her own life and prioritize her own happiness above all. Margaret and James were holding hands, looking at the evening sky in the yard. Margaret breathed deeply and said,
Now I finally feel true liberation, a life where I live as I want and respect my decisions.
James smiled and looked at her.
That's probably the happiness you were looking for.
The sky was full of starlight, and a bright smile appeared on Margaret's face. Her life began with pain and wounds, but eventually she found true freedom and happiness.